What's up, everyone? Welcome to episode 6 of Preloaded, the podcast dedicated to previewing and talking about all of the biggest and most exciting upcoming video games. My name is Josh Finderup, and I am joined, as always, by the other half of Preloaded, Mr. Jackson Van Over. How are you doing this week, Jackson?
I'm doing great, Josh. I'm so excited to dive into this PlayStation 5 reveal.
Yeah, me too. Once again, we have a ton to talk about. We're going to talk about just that, the PlayStation 5 reveal. We also got a Nintendo Direct this week. There was a new piece of hardware revealed that you might have just completely overlooked. And we're going to get into a deep dive discussion where we compare the 2 or 3 or even 4 consoles, depending on how you look at it, now that we have all of the information. So you'll want to stay tuned for all of that. But first, you can catch the video version of Preloaded. We post it every Monday over on Jackson's YouTube channel. He's JV on YouTube, JAYVEE if you're not already subscribed. Or if you'd prefer to listen, you can catch the audio version of the podcast over on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and Stitcher. And if you are listening on any of those platforms, we'd love to ask you to post a review if you have time. And if you're enjoying the podcast, post a 5-star review or even a written review. That will help us as we try to grow our audience. Also, you can write into Preloaded at the email address preloadedpodcast@gmail.com. We welcome all of your feedback and your comments, but we'd really love to hear your questions. If you have anything that you want to hear Jackson and I talk about on the following week's show, write in with your questions. We didn't get a ton of reader mail this last week, so we definitely would appreciate anything that you want to hear us talk about. Write in with your questions. Again, that's preloadedpodcast@gmail.com. And with all that out of the way, we're going to kick things off this week with a segment we've kind of been toying around with, but we are going to rename it this week. It is now called Who the Hell Are These Guys? And this is where Jackson and I will answer a question that will help you, the audience, get to know us as gamers. And heck, Jackson and I might even learn a little bit about each other as gamers. And this week, kind of in honor of all the console-related news, specifically next-gen console-related news, the question we are posing is, what next-gen game are you most excited for? So Jackson, I'm going to kick this over to you. I have a feeling I know which one you're going to say, but I don't want to spoil it. What next-gen game are you most excited for?
So for me, I think it just changed yesterday. And by yesterday, I mean the day that we're recording the podcast yesterday. So Wednesday, the day of the reveal, my game is God of War Ragnarok. Whatever that is, that's my most excited, most anticipated next-gen game. That was something that was slightly rumored. We didn't expect it. We'll talk more about this in the section about the PlayStation 5 reveal, but that's it. I am so unbelievably hyped to see what Sony Santa Monica is going to bring to follow up such a great PS4 game.
Yeah, I mean, that was a huge announcement. Very exciting that we are getting a follow-up to God of War very soon, actually. And yeah, we'll talk about that more. My pick is actually, I didn't expect this, but when I thought about what my most anticipated next-gen game is, it's actually now Ratchet and Clank. And the reason is I think that is going to be the one game for PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X that is built from the ground up for next gen. We got some kind of unexpected news this week that a lot of games are actually going to come out on last gen and next gen, but Ratchet and Clank, I think, stands alone as the one game that is really exclusive to the platform that it's releasing on, the next gen platform. So I'm really excited to see what Insomniac does new, how they design that game, how the load times work, and the level switching, and
that's
should
awesome.
Be exciting.
Yeah, I didn't expect that to be your answer. That's awesome. Yeah, I love Ratchet and Clank, so I can't wait to play that game too.
Yeah. Actually, Ratchet and Clank is not a franchise I'm typically terribly into, but for the reasons I just mentioned, yeah, it's my most anticipated next gen game. So we are going to now move on to the Out This Week segment. Every week, Jackson and I kind of rattle off the games of note that we think that you should have on your radar that are coming out the week that we post the podcast, starting on Monday, moving all the way through the Friday of that week. And this week we have 4 games that we wanted to mention. The first one is a game, Jackson, that I was not even aware of. It's called 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Aegis.
That sounds about right.
Yeah. And the reason I put it on the list initially is because it's actually reviewing really well. We'll get into that a bit later. But this is a kind of a mashup between a 2D adventure game and a top-down strategy game. That comes out on Tuesday, September 22nd. The rest of these are a bit more familiar. Roller Coaster Tycoon 3 Complete Edition comes out on Switch and PC. That's Thursday, September 24th. And then Serious Sam 4 comes out on Stadia and PC on Thursday, the 24th of September. And then the last game on the list, probably the one that the most people are looking forward to, I would imagine, Mafia Definitive Edition comes out for PlayStation 4, Xbox One, Stadia, and PC on Friday, the 25th. Any of these on your radar, or are you planning on picking any of these up, Jackson?
Yes. So personally, Mafia Definitive Edition is a game that I will play. It's one of those kind of right at the cutoff before next generation titles that I want to play. I want to experience what Hangar 13 has done in recreating this game, and I had a great time with my hands-on earlier this month, I believe it was, or maybe late last month. But anyways, I will be playing Mafia for sure.
Nice. Yeah, I will probably be passing on all of these. I think I have plenty to play, including a couple of games that we're going to talk about in our next segment, the review roundup. After we look forward at the games coming out, we look back at the games that came out the previous week and see just how they're reviewing. We got 4 games that have pretty actually great reviews from last week. Kicking things off is Super Mario 3D All-Stars, which as we're recording this game actually isn't even out yet. It's coming out the Friday after we record, but by the time you listen to this podcast, you should be able to pick it up. This has got a top critic rating of 84% and a recommended rating of 92%. Again, we use OpenCritic for our ratings. Spelunky 2 has reviewed very well. It's getting a 89% top critic rating and a recommended rating of 92%. Hades, which was announced to release just today, I think, in that Nintendo Direct, that's for the Switch and PC, that's getting a top critic rating of 92% and a recommended rating of 100%. So awesome reviews for Hades. And then again, that game that we brought up in the Out This Week segment, 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim, is getting a top critic rating of 87% and a recommended rating of 98%. So 4 really great games to choose from this week. Any of these stand out to you, Jackson?
Yes, so I definitely will be checking out Super Mario 3D All-Stars just for the nostalgia. I think we mentioned that last week. Hades piques my interest just because of the developer, Supergiant, I believe. And they always make really, really quality games. I don't know if I'm going to play it right now, but it's definitely just kind of in the back of my mind.
Yeah, I'm going to pick up Hades. I mentioned to you before we started the show that I have a road trip coming up, and I'll be playing my Switch for part of that. And Hades being, Switch and PC exclusive, it's a perfect game for me to download on my Switch and play on the road. And I'm also interested in Spelunky 2 because the game, I never played the first one, but that gameplay does look like it is my jam, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to love that game. So I'm going to check that out. I'm going to try to get to Super Mario 3D All-Stars, but there's just so much to play right now that having played all 3 games on that collection, I might be changing my tune from last week, but I'm just not sure I'm going to get to it. But
yeah, too many games. Too many games.
Yeah, kind of the story of our lives, and probably many of our listeners too right now. And that's not going to slow down at all because we have a lot to look forward to, and that leads into our next segment. But before we get to that, we are going to take a quick break. We will be right back to talk about the PlayStation 5 showcase that we just got to see. So lots to talk about. We'll be right back. And we're back. Now we are going to get into the week in previews. This is the section where we talk about all of the news about upcoming games that came out the week prior to the podcast. And we also sometimes get into our hands-on impressions. This week, no hands-on impressions because there is just too much news to talk about. Starting with the big PlayStation reveal event that everybody was looking forward to. Jackson, what were your initial impressions of this PlayStation 5? I don't know if I just called it a reveal event, but it's more of just a showcase. What was your initial impression?
I was really impressed with what Sony showed. It was more of the same. And then we saw some kind of like remaster stuff, the PlayStation Collection. That was exciting. And then they went out with a banger with God of War, Ragnarok, whatever that will be. So just like I was super impressed with the Xbox event, PlayStation comes back and gets me really excited for what they have to offer.
Yeah, I agree. I thought it was a really tight show. The pacing was good. There wasn't a lot of filler, and we got a lot of exciting news. There was also some interesting omissions of information that I thought were they kind of put a damper on some of it, but we'll get to that later. But in terms of just what they showed, yeah, the games, I thought they did a fantastic job. Sony really knows how to put together a quality buttoned-up presentation, and they hit us with banger after banger. But
they did.
I want to get into, first of all, the big information that they actually gave us at the end. We finally got the price and the release date of the PlayStation 5 consoles. Both the digital and the standard edition are releasing on November 12th. The standard edition is priced at $499 US and 499 euros, 449 pounds, and the digital edition is $399 US, 399 euros, and 359 pounds. So what was your response to that, Jackson? Was that a surprise to you, or was that kind of what you expected?
That was really in line with my predictions that I posted. I think I tweeted them, but I think I've also talked about them on this show. I thought that they were going to be competitive with the Series X, but the digital version would be a little cheaper because that makes sense. The disk drive costs money, so they had to bake that into the $499. But I expected them to still ask for at least $400 for the digital version, and they do.
Yeah, so the $499 for the standard edition, for me, that's what I expected. But unlike you, I was a little surprised that they were able to get the digital edition as cheap as they were, and I think that is for Sony, that's a fantastic price point that they can say you can get into next gen with the PS5 at $399. I was a little surprised by that, but great news for gamers all around.
It feels very PlayStation 4 to me,
yeah.
You know, like launch, that's how much it costs, and that's your price of entry for this gen.
Yeah. So those are the prices. Before we get into the actual games that they showed, I guess we are going to talk about them here, but I do want to talk about just the launch lineup. I think it's good to kind of set the stage for what people can expect when the PlayStation 5 launches on November 12th. So the games that we know for sure, this is from Sony directly. Astro's Playroom, which comes pre-installed, or I've been waiting to say this, it comes preloaded on your PlayStation 5.
There you go. Hey.
Yep. And then Destruction All-Stars, which is kind of that multiplayer extravaganza. I mean, I don't know how to explain it. But anyway, Destruction All-Stars, that's a first-party game. Miles Morales, we're getting the Standard Edition and the Ultimate Edition on the PS5. Demon's Souls comes out on launch day. That's been confirmed. Sackboy: A Big Adventure has been confirmed. And then Godfall has been confirmed. Those are all like the physical releases you'll be able to get, we know for sure, on launch day. Digitally, you'll be able to get Fortnite and Devil May Cry 5. And then just as Jackson and I were kind of exploring, we found some other articles online that confirmed, at least according to like Push Square and Games Radar, we found some articles that confirmed some other games that are supposed launch day titles. Take these with a slight grain of salt because these aren't officially from Sony, but Just Dance 2021, Assassin's Creed Valhalla is very likely, I think, Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War, Watch Dogs Legion, Bug Snacks, which we didn't see at all at the showcase, which was kind of a surprise to me, Dirt 5, which I think we've only seen in Xbox showcases, and then Marvel's Avengers, NBA 2K21, and Madden NFL 21 seem very likely as well. But again, that last kind of half of those releases, those are going to either release on launch day or very, very close to November 12th. What's your thought? What are your thoughts, Jackson, of this launch lineup?
Right. I think it's important that Sony's giving us so many options on day one outside of the PlayStation Plus collection / your physical library of PS4 games that you can pop in. You want to be able to experience that next gen experience on day one. So I was really happy to see that they have a pretty robust lineup in terms of games. This is a pretty good mix, and like Josh said, there might even be more. It's a little murky right now. This is kind of what we could cobble together for our podcast, and I was impressed.
Yeah, and I think that the first party lineup is, when you compare it, if you actually look back at other consoles, Sony consoles, and even all consoles in general, I think that the first party lineup compares to what we've gotten in the past. And I think when you stack up the third party games, particularly from Ubisoft, they're kind of hitting it pretty hard here with Assassin's Creed, Watch Dogs, Just Dance, if that's your thing. It should be a pretty strong lineup. We've also got, as we'll get into, there's the PlayStation Plus collection, which will give people, kind of, if you're going to sign up for PlayStation Plus, you'll have those games to choose from as well. But I don't want to get ahead of ourselves. We will talk about that. I do want to get into now the games that they actually showed in the showcase. They started off with a game that was rumored, but I actually didn't believe the rumors. I was thinking, nah, they're not going to show this game, and that's Final Fantasy 16. But sure enough, they showed a very long trailer, and this game is looking very different from Final Fantasy 15, very different from Final Fantasy 7 Remake. Kind of returns to a medieval fantasy setting. I saw some people were initially thinking this was some sort of Final Fantasy 14 reveal, and it is a PlayStation console exclusive, which is huge news. What did you think when you saw that, Jackson?
So, Josh, I have to be honest. I was streaming this entire event, and I thought that this was just the Final Fantasy MMO, the online. I don't know the exact number. 14. I thought that was being ported to the PS5. So I am very out of the loop on Final Fantasy, and I just don't have that connection to this franchise. So I'd love to ask you what you thought.
Well, I knew right away that this was Final Fantasy 16 because I saw it was the chocobos that they have. That's like the bird.
Right.
If you're not familiar, those little yellow, or they're not little, but those yellow birds. Anyway, when I saw that, I knew that this was Final Fantasy, and I could tell by the combat that they were showing. It wasn't MMO style combat. So I was like, this is definitely Final Fantasy 16, which was cool. It had been rumored, so I wasn't really surprised. What really took me by surprise, as I mentioned earlier, was the fact that this is a PlayStation console exclusive. So they're kind of going back to that. Square Enix is going back to that PlayStation relationship that they had so many years ago with Final Fantasy 7, 8, 9, and 10, and maybe even 12, I think, and 13. Anyways, I guess all the way up until 14 and 15, Final Fantasy was kind of a franchise that was associated with PlayStation, and they seem to be going back to that. And this is a huge get for PlayStation. And this was the first time, there were a number of instances, this was the first time in the presentation that I was kind of like, my heart stung a little bit for Xbox fans, because this is another game that this may come to PC. That was another little bit of news I want to cover. It was listed in the trailer that this is coming to PC, but then the trailers that Sony released after, or that Square Enix released, I'm not sure, did not, they took that out. So some people are speculating that this might not come to PC. I think it definitely will, but that Sony just wants to pitch it right now as a console exclusive. But
right, they want this to be a console seller. They want people, that's why they showed it, right? To build hype, but they want people to go and get a PlayStation 5 on day one for the anticipation that they'll need it for Final Fantasy 16. It's interesting that we have no release date or no release window for this game, so it's definitely there to build hype. But I like what you said about Square Enix, because we saw Kingdom Hearts come out cross-plat. Kingdom Hearts 3 came out to a lot of platforms, but now we're seeing a shift back for Final Fantasy. So this is huge for a lot of people. I'm really excited.
Yeah, this will be a big game when it comes out. I do think you mentioned the release window or lack thereof. I think this is probably, of all the games we saw in this showcase, I think this is the furthest out. It didn't visually look all that impressive to me. Like especially some of the lip syncing and the voice acting seemed a little off. And judging by that, and also Square Enix has a reputation for just announcing games long before their release. So I wouldn't expect this game next year. I would think that this might be a 2022 release. Next up, we got to see an amazing demo for Spider-Man Miles Morales. I don't really have anything to there wasn't anything here that surprised me other than this game just looks really great. The gameplay looks silky smooth. The combat looks amazing. But this is going to be more Spider-Man, and it's cool to play as a new character. We got to see a new villain. I think the villain is called the Tinkerer, which I'm not familiar with her in this case, and I think it's been a male in some of the comics. So interesting to see just how good the gameplay looked.
Yeah, I'm really excited that this is a game I'm going to get to play on my PlayStation 5 day one. That is a huge selling point. Spider-Man was huge for PlayStation 4 and huge for Insomniac. So the fact that they were empowered to make Miles Morales and have it as a launch title, I think is massive. So this was one of my favorite games of the show, even though we already knew about it.
Yep, yeah, and it's just cool to see, some new gameplay, and after the fact, after the show, they did confirm this is a launch game, so we'll get to play it on November 12th, and that's it's awesome. Also worth noting that there will be a standard edition for $50 and a special edition. I think they're calling it something other than the special edition. The Ultimate Edition, I think, is $70, and that will come on the PS5 anyway. That will come with a not a port, but a
upgraded,
what would you call it,
edition.
Jackson? Upgraded edition, of Spider-Man for the PS, which was for the PS4, now for the PS5. And it comes with all the DLC as well. So that's cool.
And it's interesting to note, not to muddy our news here, but this game's also coming out on PlayStation 4. I'm sure we're going to talk about that later, but it's coming out on both of these consoles. But for PS5, you'll get it on day one if you go out and grab it.
Yeah, and we will talk about that later, and I have some feelings about that. So that'll be an interesting conversation. Moving on, though, we then got to see Legacy of Hogwarts. This is the Harry Potter game that was leaked all the way back in October of 2018. So we've known about this for a while. This is developed by a studio here in Salt Lake. I'm in Salt Lake, for people who don't know, and our like only major development studio is working on this game, which I think is cool. But it's called Avalanche, and they are making this WB published Harry Potter game, which looks actually, I think, really good. I don't know if we got to see any gameplay in this trailer. It might have been all cinematics, but honestly, I thought it showed really well. Are you a Harry Potter fan at all, Jackson?
I can't self-ascribe myself as that, but my girlfriend is, and so I've obviously read through the books again. Growing up, I liked some of the books, but yeah, not a huge fan. That said, the prospect of, sort of a RPG looking open world Harry Potter prequel experience on next gen is awesome. And the fact that they finally revealed this thing after years of rumors, like you said, was incredible. This was the biggest surprise, actually, for me of the entire show. It looks like a very good game. It's interesting that this is going to be available, though, on PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. So it's a cross-gen title that's releasing next year.
I had somehow missed that, so that's great information for me. The trailer looked pretty next gen to me, but and I guess I didn't cover kind of what this game is at the top of this explanation. It is you mentioned it. It is an action RPG. It looks pretty heavy on some of the RPG elements. Character building and actually, I'm not sure what else, but some of the descriptions I read, this is going to be definitely heavy on the RPG elements, which fits, I think, for the Harry Potter franchise. Moving on, Call of Duty Cold War was the next game they showed. I think it's funny for me personally. This was kind of the lull in the show, and when Call of Duty is a lull, you've got yourself a good showcase.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah, and maybe it's because it's Call of Duty, and it's we get Call of Duty every year. But they showed the first campaign mission. So I want to hear your reaction, but my first reaction is they are definitely moving away from the kind of more grounded feel of Modern Warfare from last year and back into the over the top, just set piece action, nonstop action from that we kind of come to expect from Call of Duty.
Right. I think that you get that because of Treyarch's influence, and their games are a little more stylized, whereas Infinity Ward goes for that realistic, grounded approach. And then you've got Raven Software, who's seeming to have an even bigger role in this game than ever. So, yeah, I wasn't super floored by what they saw. It's more of what we expected, and I think that's because Cold War just very recently had its reveal. Like, we've had a ton of information on this game. So more of the same. I'll play it.
Yeah, I'm going to play it too. I like that the campaigns are kind of really tight, short 8 to 10 hour experiences, which is perfect for me. Speaking of having too many games to play, but I'll definitely check this out.
Right.
The next game that they went into was another just banger. We've got a bunch of them here. Resident Evil Village, I think looks fantastic. We got to see much more gameplay this go around, and we got to see what I thought was interesting. They showed kind of a, sorry, I just bumped my microphone. Hopefully that wasn't too noisy. They showed this like story element, the storybook element rather, where this little girl is wandering through this like kind of fantastical world, which was very non-Resident Evil. Did you have a reaction to that, Jackson?
I did. Initially, I was like, this is, just like you said, very un-Resident Evil. It's like something we haven't seen for this brand ever, like to market it this way. And I'm curious if this is only a marketing thing or if that is like little segments that we will experience throughout the story.
Yeah, I got the impression that it might actually be in the game, which, again, very different for Resident Evil, but this franchise is known for mixing things up. I mean, if you look at like the early Resident Evil games to Resident Evil 4, then 5 and 6 and 7, they've almost all been completely different. So I'm interested to see how they mix it up with Village or Resident Evil 8. It'll be very interesting to see. So that was Resident Evil. I'm very much looking forward to this. I don't know. We did get a release. Well, I think we already knew. It's coming out in 2021. I'm expecting this game a little earlier in the year, but I have nothing to base that off of. Just kind of how that's where Resident Evil 7 came out. I guess it came out, I think, in February of the year it came out.
Yeah, I think it'll be the latter half just because of everything that's going on in the world. Like, that may delay things, but who knows? Village might have been slated to come out earlier, and now it's delayed to the early half of 2021. So yeah, we'll see.
Yep. Yeah. Very cool. I'm very much looking forward to Resident Evil.
Me too.
In fact, the next game on this list might be the game that I think looks the coolest of all the games we saw. This game is just dripping with cool, and that's Deathloop. From Bethesda and Arcane Studios. So we got to see a bunch of new gameplay. We got to see kind of more how this time loop process might work. This really looks kind of like a roguelite to me, a first-person roguelite, but they haven't used that term at all, where you go through these levels and try to figure out how to complete certain objectives and assassinate your target. Are you as excited about this game as I am, Jackson?
I really am, and actually the way that you just described it makes me even more excited, because I think for a first-person game to take that approach is very unique and to sort of set back the time. I don't know if you played Outer Wilds when that came out
I did.
last year.
I didn't finish it, but I played it.
Okay, that game is brilliant in the way that it uses time as a central mechanic and a central theme. And if Deathloop goes for that approach like it seems that they're suggesting with these trailers so far, and you bake in the fact that it feels like a roguelite experience, I think it's going to be really good. And I love Arcane. They make games that drip with personality. They are always unique, and I think they're masterful devs. And the fact that this is a PS5 console exclusive, it's timed, right? I'm not 100% sure on that.
So they were pretty clear in this presentation that this is like, it seemed to me anyways, that this was a PS5 exclusive, console exclusive, and not going to be released on other consoles. But if I remember from the previous showcase, that was not what they communicated. I thought that this was a timed exclusive like you just mentioned, but it seemed from like what they said here that this might only be on PlayStation and PC, but
if that's true... Yeah, I couldn't find anything either. But if that's true, that's, again, a huge win for Sony. This game looks fantastic.
Yeah, and any game really from Bethesda, I mean, whether you like them or not, they're huge releases when they come from Bethesda and their studios. And if this is not coming out on other consoles, again, you know, my heart would kind of hurt a little bit for Xbox gamers. So the other thing I wanted to note on this is it does look like it's taking some influence from the Hitman games, where you kind of can experiment and figure out how to assassinate whoever you're assassinating. So just something else.
Right. I think it's also very Dishonored in the way that it's open-ended. It's sort of a sandbox kind of game where you create the opportunities. They give you a bunch of options, but you've got to figure out how to use those tools in order to get the job done. So I'm excited for this game. It releases Q2 2021, so it's not that far away.
Yeah. I'll be very excited for that. The next game that they showed is not as much my cup of tea. Devil May Cry Special Edition. This is definitely seems like a game for the fans of this game. I tried Devil May Cry 5. Or I should say Devil May Cry 5 Special Edition, and I tried Devil May Cry 5. I couldn't get into it, but this is coming out at launch digitally. You can't get it physically. It's only a digital release, and it features some. The biggest feature that I read that people seem to be most excited about is you can now play as the character Virgil, who I'm not familiar with, but apparently that's something people have been asking for in Devil May Cry 5. So did you play this when it came out?
I did, and I'm not a huge DMC fan. I know they have very, very passionate fans. I actually talked to one while I was going to pre-order my PS5, but we'll save that story for later. Virgil is Dante's like mortal enemy. It's his brother. So
okay,
and you only he's the villain. So it's kind of like, oh my gosh, you get to play as him. So yeah, this is very exciting for, like you said, kind of that subsection of fans. But this will also be on Xbox Series X.
Yeah. This is not an exclusive. I imagine it might even be coming to PC, but I'm not sure we've gotten any confirmation of that. The next game, again, not one that I'm super jazzed for. Oddworld Soulstorm. This is the next game in the Oddworld series. This has been going on since the original PlayStation. These are kind of 2D puzzle platformers. You interested in this at all?
Unfortunately not. I'm going to pass on this one. I did play Stranger's Wrath, but that was a 3D third-person shooter. Yep. So very different kind of game.
Yeah, the Oddworld series has kind of jumped around genres a little bit. The next game is one that I've never played, a Five Nights at Freddy's game. I have no interest in it, I have to be honest. But for fans of Five Nights at Freddy's, you will be able to play that on your PlayStation 5. This is Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach.
Yeah, I think it's just a franchise. I mean, you see Five Nights at Freddy's toys at Target, so it's just one of those franchises that as long as it's got people playing, they're going to keep making games.
Yep. And next up is a game that was close to one of my, we answered what's our most anticipated next-gen game, and I almost answered with this one because it has crept up my list of most anticipated games, and that's Demon's Souls. This game looks beautiful. Bluepoint is such a talented team. They really impress. Like the remaster of Shadow of Colossus or the remake rather, was fantastic, and I think that they look to be keeping with that same level of quality with Demon's Souls. This game just looks, it's gorgeous.
It really is. And what was stunning to me is that PlayStation neglected to give us any indication of when it would be coming out during the show.
Yeah.
And then only until after we learned that this is a launch title. Like, we're going to be able to play this game, PlayStation 5 exclusive game, right when the PS5 comes out. And even though the initial trailer said that it would come out on PC, Sony actually removed the trailers from all their social media platforms and re-uploaded them without that little slide card at the end there. So maybe this is not coming out on PC, which is crushing for a lot of people, because I know so many Soulsborne fans have just been begging to have these games on PC. So Demon's Souls, like you said, is such a huge game. It's almost right there with Spider-Man for me. It's very close.
Yeah, I initially wasn't too excited about this because I'm a huge Sekiro and Bloodborne fan, but I've never been able to get into the Dark Souls games because they're too slow and lumbering for me. But I watched the gameplay of this, and it looked like dodging is definitely, like, I saw some really quick dodges. It looks like you'll be a little bit more mobile in this game than you will be in the Dark Souls game. So I'm very excited. And based on this trailer, yeah, I got much more excited than I was previously. I was a little disappointed we didn't get to see any UI, because you can kind of tell a lot about how these games work by seeing how, like, the stamina and the life meters work. You didn't get to see any of that, which was a little disappointing, but I'll definitely, actually, I pre-ordered this with my PlayStation 5. Again, we'll talk about that later. So this will be one I'll definitely be diving into. And I will just add on to what you said about the PC release. That's exactly what happened on Final Fantasy 16 as well. I suspect that this will eventually come to PC, but that's just me. But you're right that they did remove that. I think they want to definitely pitch this as a PlayStation 5 exclusive, which at launch it will be. Next was Fortnite. Nothing special here, just it's available at launch. So if you're a Fortnite player and you're getting a PS5, that's great news for you, but I don't think that surprised anybody.
Yeah, this is, I don't think people are buying a PS5 for Fortnite.
Nope.
It's a free-to-play game, and I seriously doubt that the experience is going to be that much better on next gen. I could be wrong there, but Fortnite has obviously a huge audience even to this day. But yeah, don't want to focus too much on this. It was like, okay, yeah, we know.
Yep. So again, like I said, cool for people who play Fortnite. And moving on, cool for people who maybe haven't played very many PlayStation 4 games. PlayStation announced the PlayStation Plus Collection, which will be launching, I believe, day one with the PlayStation 5. This is, if you're subscribed to PlayStation Plus, which is their subscription service for online play, you get a list of really great games, but they've all, if you've owned a PlayStation 4, in all honesty, you've probably played most of these. God of War, Last of Us Remastered, Uncharted 4: A Thief's End, Battlefield 1, Monster Hunter World, Fallout 4, Final Fantasy 15, The Last Guardian, Ratchet & Clank, Infamous Second Son, Days Gone, Bloodborne, Detroit Become Human, Batman Arkham Knight, Mortal Kombat X, Persona 5, Until Dawn, and Resident Evil Biohazard, Resident Evil 7.
Yeah.
What was your reaction to this, Jackson?
To me, it seems a little strange. It seemed at first that when they flashed the logo and started saying you're going to get to play all these games, that this was PlayStation's Xbox Game Pass competitor. And after learning exactly what this is, it's not that at all to me. It seems a little weird because, again, like you said, most PlayStation 4 games, 99%, in fact, we got that quote from the Sony or PlayStation CEO, can be played on the PlayStation 5. So this to me seems like it only appeals to Xbox owners who are switching to PlayStation or first-time console owners that maybe are just getting into video games and are deciding to go with the PS5. Now they have this nice library to go with their subscription that they're going to have to pay for to play Call of Duty. That is kind of how I see this.
Yep. Yeah, I completely agree. I don't think this was targeted at the core PlayStation fan base. I think this was, maybe PlayStation in some room, they were thinking, how can we maybe tip the scales a little bit for Xbox gamers who are on the fence about purchasing a PlayStation 4 or switching from Xbox to PlayStation 4. At least this gives them, if you're leaving Game Pass, now you do have a library of really fantastic games to play. But yeah, for me, I think the only game on here that I've not played in some capacity is Battlefield 1, so.
Yeah, it's just interesting. Like loyal PlayStation owners like you and myself, we've played all these games. So the value's not there. We have them on disc or we have them digital downloads. So yeah, it's an interesting play.
Yep. But cool for people who, are new to PlayStation. Actually, this is awesome for those people.
Yeah, so, a lot of value there for a very specific person.
Yeah. Can't really knock it for any real reason. The last announcement from the show was one you mentioned earlier. This was, I think some people suspected we might see something. I didn't think so. I thought it was too early, but God of War, I'm going to call it God of War Ragnarok. I don't think they've officially given it a title. It's just like the next God of War, whatever that is. What were your thoughts when you saw this?
I was just blown away. I actually interpreted the rumors as it being more likely that Sony would just say, you can play God of War 2018 on PlayStation 5. Like that's something we just kind of assumed that would happen at some point. It did with the PlayStation Plus collection, but the fact that they came out and revealed that the next God of War is coming, I think just kind of sealed the deal. If anyone was on the fence about getting a PlayStation 5 and like investing and jumping in right at launch, the fact that this game is coming and you will have your console, ready to go when it comes out is huge. And if you remember the end of God of War 2018, there's huge like sneak sort of hints at what we're going to see in the future and the expanding of this universe. And it's it's mind-blowing to even think about right now where they could be going with this game. So it really was the perfect way to close out this perfect show.
Yeah, and the big surprise for me was that it's coming in 2021, which I'm skeptical. My first thought was, oh, this is getting delayed. But I want to give them the benefit of the doubt. If we're going to get this game in 2021, that means that in 2021, first-party releases, we're going to get, if they hit all their dates, Ratchet and Clank, Horizon Forbidden West, and God of War Ragnarok. I mean, that's just like, that's like the first year of Switch where we got Mario, Zelda, and whatever else we got. I mean, it's crazy.
It is absolutely crazy. You're right. And it'll further solidify, I think, what a lot of people are predicting to be a very strong start for Sony in this next generation.
Yep. Yeah. So very cool. And you know, also, if this does come out in 2021, it means we won't have to wait that long to see the gameplay. I mean, sometime next year, they're going to have to show gameplay. So I'm going to be really excited to see when we do get to see that, what it's going to look like. But yeah. So finally, we have covered everything that they showed at the PlayStation 5 showcase. Before we move on, anything you want to add to this discussion before moving on?
I think we hit all the high points. Again, Sony killed it, and we expected them to.
Yeah. And that's during the show. I agree, they killed it. But after the show, some information came out, and that leads into our next story that I think a lot of people were actually, quite frankly, upset about. And that is that Spider-Man Miles Morales, Horizon Forbidden West, and Sackboy: A Big Adventure will all launch on PS4 alongside their PS5 counterparts. Now, this comes from WCCF Tech, who had a write-up, and they said, to support the PlayStation 4 community as they transition to the next generation, when they're ready, SIE will launch PS4 versions of a few exclusive titles: Marvel's Spider-Man Miles Morales, Sackboy: Big Adventure, and Horizon Forbidden West. Sony writes in its official press release, the free upgrade to the PS5 version will be available both digitally and physically. Then they went on to say that while these three games were designed to take advantage of PS5 and its unique next-gen features like the ultra-high-speed SSD and DualSense controller, PS4 owners will also be able to enjoy these experiences when they launch. So I felt like Sony kind of pulled the wool over our eyes prior when they had pitched these games as really purebred PlayStation 5 exclusives. Did you get that same impression?
I think so, but I think that my reaction was a little more like, okay, I get it. I do get where they're coming from. And I think that Sony spent a lot of time with their marketing and the way they're positioning themselves to explain away why they are doing this. They're saying things like, you will see more cars, you will see more crowds, more things on the screen at once in Spider-Man Miles Morales on the PS5 version. So they're basically saying you will see a next-gen version, a next-gen experience on the PlayStation 5, but we're giving you a bridge to get there by also offering it on PS4. Horizon Forbidden West, though, that is shocking to me because we don't know when that game is coming out. I presume it's going to be the latter half of next year, but the fact that that's coming out on PS4 is a little shocking because at that point, it might be almost close to 6 months to a year that this thing's been out.
Yeah, I heard some people online speculating that maybe this meant Horizon is a little earlier than we might have initially anticipated, especially with God of War now also being scheduled for a 2021 release. But yeah, this was definitely a surprise. I also understand. I mean, I think that they'd be leaving money on the table, tons of it, with over 100 million PS4s out there if they didn't release these games. But I do feel like they had pitched these as, exclusives to the PlayStation 5, and I felt like that was a little misleading. My excitement for these games isn't dampened at all because of this news, but I also think it's interesting that Xbox basically was very transparent about the same strategy. They just said all our games are going to release across generations, and Sony was doing the opposite. They were kind of withholding this information, and I think that strategy proved to benefit Sony, and it was to Xbox's detriment that they were so transparent, which I think is unfortunate. But
that's a great point. I think you're spot on there.
Moving on, the next story, we get back into the games coming out later, and this is a bit of a bummer. Kena Bridge of Spirits was delayed from holiday 2020 to Q1 2021. The developers at Ember Lab released a statement. I believe this was on Twitter, and it just in part it says this year has brought many challenges, and our transition to working from home has caused development to move slower than we'd hoped. For this reason, we have made the difficult decision to delay the release of Kena Bridge of Spirits to Q1 2021. Nothing really to add here. I want to get through this pretty quickly, but this is a bummer.
Yeah, game looks great. Take your time.
Yeah. I should say it is a bummer, but completely support their decision. The next story is actually pretty big, and on any other week, this might even be like one of the headliners. But right. Facebook revealed the launch of Oculus Quest 2. This is the follow-up to the Oculus Quest, kind of the standalone VR headset that they have released alongside the Oculus Rift, and the Quest 2 will start at $300 with a 64 gigabyte version and a $400 256 gigabyte version. It has upgraded specs and a high resolution, more powerful processor than the Quest initially, and the reviews are pretty good. Now, I know a lot of people have some feelings about Facebook and how they're handling their Oculus VR headsets and how you're going to have to be a Facebook member in order to use them down the road. That's a major bummer, but hardware-wise, this seems to be getting a very positive reception. Did you check this out at all, Jackson?
I actually did not, just because I was overwhelmed with the PlayStation news. But I can say that it's nice to see that VR is continuing in the right direction, and Facebook certainly has the funds to keep pushing it forward, which I think that's the silver lining if you have very understandable reserves with Facebook and the fact that they're requiring you to log in with an account to even use this thing. I get that, but it is kind of nice to see money fueled into what is basically the most revolutionary thing that's happening in gaming right now, I think. Even though I don't think the games are there yet, we're slowly getting some, like Medal of Honor, where we've got Half-Life. That game came out recently and people love that, but very small user base. Hopefully this gets in the hands of more people so we can keep pushing this medium forward.
Yeah, and speaking of games, just one thing of note, or two rather, on this story is that they did announce a Assassin's Creed game and surprisingly, a Splinter Cell game for the Quest 2, but we didn't get to see any footage of that. But a lot of people were upset that a Splinter Cell game was announced for a VR system and it wasn't like a standalone, or I should say a
core experience. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah,
it does kind of suck for those fans, but hey, these are big name titles coming to this platform, so it should push it a little because of that.
Yep. So moving on back into the realm of next gen, we got a bit of news about the Xbox Series S. I don't think this was too surprising, but Microsoft did announce that the Series S will not run Xbox One X versions of backwards compatible games. And the reason I say that's not terribly surprising is because those games often run at 4K, and we know that the Xbox Series S is not capable of outputting 4K. I don't want to get too into the weeds here, but did this surprise you, or I know some people might have had a negative reaction to this. Did you at all, Jackson? No,
I didn't. I think that although I really do not like Xbox's naming conventions, like with Xbox One S, One X, Series S, and Series X, I think it makes perfect sense that an Xbox X version of a game will not run on an S version, right? That just makes sense in my mind. So the fact that Xbox One X directly translates to the Series X, whereas the S is more to the S because it is a budget console. So not really surprising for me. This makes sense.
Yeah, and if you are thinking like, oh, well, the Xbox One X is last gen and the Xbox One S is next gen, why can't the S play those games? It all comes down to 4K. Right. Basically, if you want 4K and you want these Xbox One X versions, you're going to have to buy an Xbox Series X. So, yeah, if you're going to get into the Xbox next-gen family, you just want to make sure you get the right box for what you want.
Exactly. And you've got good option or very different options there to choose from.
For sure. So unbelievably, we still have a lot to talk about. We got a Nintendo Direct just the morning that we're recording this, and I actually thought it was a really great Direct. I just watched it a couple hours ago, and as far as these Nintendo Direct partner showcases, this is by far the best one of those we've gotten. Was I'll just run down the list of the things that were of note here. Monster Hunter Rise coming in March 26th of 2021. Balon or Balon, I'm not sure how you pronounce it. Balon Wonderland coming March 26th again, 2021. Disgaea 6 or Disgaea 6, I think that's how you say it. Defiance of Destiny coming 2021. Ori and the Will of the Wisps is available on Switch today. Again, we're recording this on Thursday. Hades from Supergiant Games is also out today. And then Monster Hunter Stories 2, Wings of Ruin coming summer 2021. So a big Monster Hunter day on the Nintendo Switch.
Yeah, there was a lot of focus on that. I actually did not watch the Direct. I just kind of read up a summary of it. Not super my alley, but it's interesting that Ori came to Switch. That's fascinating. And then Hades is finally out. So good news.
Yeah. I did watch it, and I thought all of these games showed particularly well. There were other games announced, so if you want to see everything, go check out the Direct. But yeah, the Monster Hunter games look fantastic. I thought Monster Hunter Rise, it didn't look quite on par with Monster Hunter World, but if you're on Switch and you want a Monster Hunter experience, this looks to be a pretty core experience. So very exciting for Monster Hunter fans. And yeah, I'm playing Ori and the Will of the Wisps right now on my Xbox. We'll talk about that later. One real quick hit. There was a game revealed this week, and Jackson, you brought this to my attention, so I'll hand this one over to you.
Yes, really quickly, it's called The Invincible. It's a first-person, single-player sci-fi thriller set in a retro future timeline. It looks very BioShock meets almost No Man's Sky, but don't let that kind of deter you away from it because it looks really cool. Awesome aesthetic. This is a next-gen game coming to PS5, PC, and Xbox Series X in 2021. It's from a studio called Starward Industries. They're Polish, and so they've got talent from CD Projekt Red, Techland, other places. So these guys have worked on The Witcher 3, Dying Light, and Dead Island, some really solid franchises that have produced great work. So The Invincible should definitely be on your radar.
Yep, they definitely seem to have a lot of talent behind The Invincible, and that game looks very cool. But moving on, it is now time to get into our deep dive discussion. This is the part of the podcast where we pick a topic, sometimes from the week's news and sometimes totally at random, and we dig in for a deeper discussion. This week, we are going to look at the PS5 and the Xbox Series X and see how they stack up against one another. And I guess some people might frame this as the PS5 versus the Series X and the Series S, but I don't think it's as much of a versus this go around. I don't think this is as much of a console war. There's definitely competition, but they're doing such different things that this generation looks so much different than it did before. Before we get into this, what are your thoughts around just the overall quote-unquote console war and how it looks this generation, Jackson?
I think it looks different this time around because these companies are framing themselves differently. And if you look at previous generations, they were very similar. They're like, this is our machine, it does this. And then the other guys are like, this is our machine, it does this. And they do very similar things. And now we have Xbox over here who's offering a very value-friendly option. But we have PlayStation over here saying we are still offering the best experience and we're not even going to offer a value version of our next gen. So it's still a competition, but like you said, it's just a little bit different this time around.
Yeah, it definitely is. I think that they have very unique paths, Xbox and PlayStation, and that's great. They both can kind of own their messaging because they're saying such different things, but they are launching on the same day and they are going to be competing for dollars. And I think that to deny that is a bit naive. And speaking of dollars, the pricing, now that we know the pricing, Xbox Series S at $300 and the X at $500, and then the PlayStation having a $500 and a $400 option. Did you feel like there was one or the other Xbox or PlayStation that had an advantage on pricing?
I think it's interesting. I think they both have different advantages. Having a console at $300 is game changing. We saw it with the Switch, for example. I think it launched at $300. I'm not 100%
Yes, the
sure.
Switch did. Yep.
It did, yeah. So And the Switch, if you look at the sales in the short time that it's been out, it is just mind-blowing how quickly that thing is selling. Not to say that the Series S will pull a Switch. They're very different consoles and markets. But I think that Xbox has the value advantage. It makes sense that people without huge discretionary income and budgets will want a next-gen experience, but go for the budget, which is the Xbox Series S. But then I think you can look at it from the angle of the PlayStation 5 Digital Edition gives you that top-of-the-line next-gen experience for $400. So it's not that much more, but it doesn't have the disc, which is a problem for a lot of people. So I think it's worth noting that technically you're getting a top-of-the-line experience for cheaper on the PlayStation 5 if you're willing to sacrifice that physical media.
Yeah, I completely agree. I actually don't have a lot to add on the price thing. I think the Series S makes Xbox the choice for people who are on a very strict budget and want just a ton of games. Actually, the one thing I will add on price is that the PlayStation 5 is actually a lot more than $500 when you factor in the price of games if you want to buy some next-gen games. But you can get into the Xbox Series S, pay for Game Pass, and just have a huge library of games. Now, I know that PlayStation does have PlayStation Now, but for one, they're not marketing it at all. We didn't see it at all yesterday. I was actually really disappointed about that. And with the way that Xbox is pushing Game Pass, I feel like you can basically just go in and buy the Series S for $300 and call it a day. Go home, play your games. Whereas with PlayStation 5, yesterday I pre-ordered 3 games. That's almost $200 extra.
Right. That's how much it costs to have Game Pass for a year. Just by comparison, if we're being honest about how much things cost, that's it. So, I don't have much else to add except for the fact that you're paying up for the ability to play your physical library if you have one. You have to pay $500 if you want a disk drive. This is something that I actually had a few people call me out on the YouTube version of our podcast here and got feedback about. It's totally worth noting. If you have a physical library, you don't have a choice really if you care about playing all those games that you invested money in.
Yeah, so you can see behind me, I have a huge physical library, and that's for me, physical was the only way to go. So I had to pay the extra $100.
And you guys you can see behind me, but you don't see any games, and there aren't any in my office. I don't really own physical games. I abandoned them. So it's interesting. There's a lot of people I think that are on both sides of this, like Josh and I.
Yeah. And so one other part of this quote unquote console war, and this is the part that I think is really less consequential and less important, but a lot of people will bring this up in the YouTube comments or just comments in general, and that's the specs of the consoles. Which one is more powerful? I mean, I did a huge video on the PlayStation 5. I'm very, I think I'm pretty knowledgeable on what the PlayStation 5 can do. I'm less knowledgeable on the Xbox Series X, but from what I can tell, if you're debating between a Series X and a PlayStation 5 based on the specs, it's a toss-up. I mean, we can get into some of them here. I think one big one is the PlayStation 5's SSD has only 825 gigabytes, where the Series X has 1. I'm not going to get into as much the Series S because that's kind of a unicorn when it comes to these consoles. It's a bit different. The GPU and the CPU are pretty close. The Xbox Series X runs at more teraflops than the PS5, but the clock speeds are different. So that kind of throws a wrench in the whole teraflop argument. The PS5 has 3D audio where the Series X doesn't. That might be a selling point for some people. But ultimately, I think this is what it comes down to. Both are capable of 8K and 120 frames per second, if you can even display those. But if you're talking about what the systems are capable of, they can both do the same stuff. They can both do ray tracing. I don't want to go on too much about this, but surely there will be some flame wars around this.
Of course, there always is. I actually encountered some while doing some research for our podcast here, and it's just funny what people what people point out. Most people point out the games, which we'll talk about in a second when we're comparing these consoles. But for me, I expect these multi-platform games to play exactly the same across both of these consoles, pretty much like they already do. We had some fluctuations on the Pro and the Series or the Xbox One X this generation, but for now, for the launch, I expect these to be very similar experiences outside of the first-party titles. I think Sony's going to still deliver that premium experience with Spider-Man Miles Morales and Demon's Souls. In fact, the thing that I think is most unique about the specs, which isn't even a spec, it's a peripheral, is the controller. I think PS5's controller is genuinely intriguing and a selling point for me. I don't know if it is for everyone, but haptic feedback and adaptive triggers, they sound awesome to me.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to get that controller in our hands. I'm not one to me it's not a selling point, but it'll be I just hope it feels really, really comfortable because I love the DualShock 4, and I hope that this is on par with that. I actually like the Xbox controller even better, so I hope they don't tweak it too much.
I know. I think the Xbox controller works for more people, and the PS5 feels a little bit like a toy. But if you're if you're large like me, then you're going to run into that with a lot of things. So,
yep. And one last thing on performance is they all, including the S, they all have an SSD. So they're all fast. So that's going to, like all these talk about load times. It's not going to matter which console you get. You're gonna experience those benefits no matter which of these that you buy. So that's great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Moving away from hardware, though, the launch lineups for the games are, I think this is where, Sony, especially after that Halo announcement, this is where Sony, at least in my mind, is, if you are going to look at this as a competition, this is where Sony might be winning.
Yeah, I actually do believe that they are winning on the launch lineup. I actually got a more reputable source in front of me right now, Josh. If you don't mind, I can just rattle off what you can expect on launch.
Absolutely,
in terms of
go for it.
Exclusives, yeah. So you've got Spider-Man Miles Morales. This is for the PlayStation 5. Spider-Man Miles Morales, Sackboy: A Big Adventure, Destruction, All-Stars, Demon's Souls, Astro's Playroom is going to be preloaded, and Godfall. That is it for the like exclusives, and then you get to multi-plat, and it's pretty much all over the place. And all multi-platform games are going to launch on both consoles on launch day. So that's for the PS5, and then Xbox Series X. You've got Gears Tactics, which was already on the previous gen. It came out earlier this year.
Only for PC, though, I think. I don't think
really?
I don't think that released for Xbox One. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty darn sure.
Okay, well, there you go. And then we've got Tetris Effect, which is Xbox exclusive. It's a multiplayer Tetris game. And then you've got Yakuza Like a Dragon, which I believe was on previous gen. But it's not listed as a launch title right now for PlayStation 5. And then you've got The Falconeer, which I don't know really anything about, but those are the Xbox like exclusive launch lineup games that are not coming out on PlayStation 5.
Okay. So, yeah, it's I do think that, yeah, if you're looking for that, like you mentioned earlier, that premium next gen exclusive experience, there's more to play on PlayStation 5, but with Xbox, again, I'm probably starting to sound like a broken record, but with Game Pass, it's that there will be quite frankly, there will be more to play on your Xbox than there will be on the PlayStation 5 if you sign up for Game Pass.
Absolutely. There will be.
And there was a really interesting tweet that I found yesterday. So Aaron Greenberg, who is the Xbox, his Twitter account lists him as the Xbox games, or just Xbox Games Marketing. So he's one of their high-level marketing folks over at Xbox. Anyway, he retweeted a tweet from Xbox News that said, confirmed, Xbox is now the console with the most games confirmed to be next-gen only console exclusives. And then they included a list of games. Some of these I actually haven't, I'm not familiar with. One up at the top anyway, As Dusk Falls, but the rest are Avowed, Everwild, Fable, Forza Motorsport, The Gunk, The Medium, Phantasy Star Online 2, New Genesis, Scorn, Senua's Saga, Hellblade 2, Stalker 2, State of Decay 3, and Warhammer 40,000 Dark Tide. So that's just an interesting tweet that, if that's true, this is not from Aaron Greenberg himself. He retweeted this from a Twitter account, Xbox News.
Yeah, I think that person tweeted that, or that account decided to do that only after they saw confirmation that Sony came out and said, look, we are releasing a lot of these games on PlayStation 4. That's what that sounds like to me. So, yeah, it's interesting that they are coming out and saying that, but it's hard for me to look at that list of games and say, like, okay, now I'm only getting an Xbox, you know? I'm not in that position, luckily. I am planning to get both, but if I wasn't, I can't say that would be a convincing tweet to me personally.
I actually agree. I think of the games on that list, the ones that do speak to me are, The Medium. I'm going to play that. And Hellblade 2. And other than that, and Everwild, but that is I think that game is a long way off. So, but just an interesting take.
It is, and I'll add Avowed to that list. It's an Obsidian RPG open world. People are out of their minds, blown, excited, out of the water on that. I'll check out some other things, but like I said, that's not like a convincing marketing point to say that those are only Xbox, Series S and X games for me personally.
Yeah, and there just before we move on, there will be, I think, give it some time, and Xbox is going to have plenty of first party exclusives, and eventually they will be next gen exclusives. They've put all this money, they've invested heavily into these first party studios, so there will be, the games will come, but it might take a little more time on the Xbox side. Right,
and I do actually want to point out before we move on, Halo Infinite not coming out is just a huge gut punch. If that game was a launch title for Xbox, I don't want to get into numbers predictions on hypotheticals, but the Xbox would sell much more than it will, in my opinion, if Halo Infinite was there day one, November 10th.
Yeah, we can't overlook that. That was a major setback for Xbox and Xbox gamers. So hopefully that when it does come out, hopefully it's honestly, hopefully it's the best Halo ever, because if it's not, I think it's going to be a disappointment.
That's a great point. It needs to be really good.
Yeah. So sticking with the games, but in a different capacity, backwards compatibility. This is one area where Xbox is, I think, definitely winning the day, where they have invested heavily in making many of their original Xbox, Xbox 360, and Xbox One games backwards compatible on the Series S and X, whereas PlayStation has basically said, we're doing our very best to make every PlayStation 4 game backwards compatible, but beyond that, you're out of luck.
Right, and I did note that you will be able to play those games if they were ported to the PlayStation 4, if they came out on previous generations. Obviously, I think that goes without saying, but just to clarify, if there's a PS2 game like Grand Theft Auto San Andreas that was ported to the PS4, that's a game you can play on your PS5, but it's much more restricted, and I think this is by design. Personally, I think Sony wants you to just play their new games. They're not like Xbox in their messaging. They really want you to move forward and not look back.
Yeah. So if you are looking forward to playing old games, particularly if you have a connection to the Xbox library and lineage, Xbox has a lot to offer here. And speaking of having a lot to offer, the next kind of area where the two consoles they do compare. It's the services, and here we have Game Pass, which Microsoft is putting so many of their eggs into that basket, especially now that they don't have a strong first-party lineup to launch with. Whereas Sony they do have PS Plus, and I don't want to leave out PlayStation Now. PlayStation Now is more a bit of a direct comparison to Game Pass, but they don't have those first-party games day and date.
Right. It's kind of a different offering. I guess, yeah, you're right. PlayStation Now is the more direct competitor to Xbox Game Pass, but I think everyone around the industry pretty much knows that it's hard to compare the two, because PlayStation Now just doesn't offer the same value, and it doesn't offer the same experience even. And it's taken a long time. It's like you said, it's weird that they didn't even put that at the showcase. So in terms of like a Netflix-esque subscription, I think we do give the win to Xbox. It's kind of hard to argue that, in my opinion.
Absolutely. And I would just, any gamers out there who haven't experienced what it feels like to download Game Pass, like if you're looking to get into Xbox for the first time next gen, or even if you want to, if there's a price cut on the Series X on the Xbox One S, like let's say they start selling that thing for $150. I think you can get it right now for $199.
Mm-hmm.
The experience of the first time you get onto Game Pass and you're just like, I can download any one of these games right now and just start playing it is amazing.
Yeah, it's not snake oil. I feel like a lot of people believe that have not gotten into it. They think that, a bunch of games that you don't even want to play. I mean, they're adding EA games to the lineup this holiday.
Yeah,
you're going to want to play those games.
Yeah, so I would encourage anyone who hasn't gotten into Game Pass, if you have an Xbox or you're looking into getting an Xbox, you must get Game Pass. It's fantastic value.
Yeah, it's worth it.
But is that enough for Xbox, Jackson? Do you think that that's going to carry them through?
That's a tough question. I think that it absolutely offers enough value over time for gamers on a budget. We talked about that example earlier. You already pre-ordered 3 PlayStation 5 games. That's Game Pass for a year, in which you would have been able to play, I don't know, however many games you have free time to play. But the question is, does it still appeal to gamers who aren't looking for the value, that aren't on a budget, that still want to experience a huge library for that subscription? And I'm just going to use myself as an example. Yes, I use Game Pass. I have played some Wasteland 3, some Microsoft Flight Simulator. It is attractive to me. But to answer your question, is it enough? Ultimately, I don't think so. What do you think?
Not on its own, for sure. They are going to have to do more to compete with Sony's first-party offerings, even if those offerings are coming out on PlayStation 4. Now we know that they're not as quote-unquote exclusive to PS5 as we once thought. When Sony does these showcases, they give people a ton of reasons to say, that's why I need to buy a PlayStation. And I just don't see as many of those reasons when I look at Xbox's showcases. I do think Game Pass is a massive one. And if you are looking for value, if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably like a pretty hardcore gamer. And so this isn't for you. But if you are like more of a casual gamer and you just want value, Xbox all the way. If you are a hardcore gamer, but you still are just on a budget, maybe you've had a tough year this year, which a lot of us have, or maybe you just don't have a lot of money to throw around, Xbox all the way. If you do want those, like I think of myself personally, if I were to only get an Xbox this next generation, I would absolutely feel like I'm missing out. If I were to go the other way, get a PlayStation and not an Xbox, I'd still feel like I'm missing out, but I could handle it. It wouldn't be as bad, That's a great way of putting it. I can't imagine only getting, just me, myself, in my position, I cannot imagine getting only an Xbox. I would be missing out on some incredible games. And I think that Sony's messaging is very clear compared to Xbox's. Like Game Pass, I guess, is not that complicated as a concept, but it's like, we're going to sell you the subscription and you're going to be able to get the first party titles on day one. And there's over 100 games and we add them frequently. Sony's just like, look at our games. They're awesome. So I think there's a messaging issue baked into there too. Yeah, for sure. I think Xbox has stumbled quite a bit, not just with the Halo thing, but their messaging has been a bit more confusing. And I hope to see them tighten that up as we move forward. I mean, so speaking of, where do you see this generation of consoles in 1 or even 2 years?
For me, I see that Sony and PlayStation are going to have a pretty healthy lead. It's hard to come up with numbers. I actually wish that we had found like the first 2-year numbers for PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, because I think that's pretty telling. I think that Xbox is starting off on a better foot than last generation, and not having something like Kinect to shove down our throats and all-in-one entertainment. All of that stuff is gone. It is about the games, but I think that brand loyalty is just way too strong for PlayStation. I think people know that they're going to get a really good experience. So I think that the PlayStation 5 will outsell Xbox Series S and X by a pretty good margin for the first 2 years.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it will be very interesting to see. I think we're going to have to rely more on anecdotal evidence because I don't know if whoever's losing, I don't think is going to release their sales numbers. But it'll be just really interesting to see if both these consoles, or all three of them, the PlayStation 5 and then the Series X and Series S, are all just difficult to find this holiday. I think we'll get a good idea of if there's one, like if the Series S, if you can just walk into a store and buy a Series S in December, I think that's going to be very bad for Xbox. But down the road, I think that if Microsoft truly believes in their strategy and they keep pushing it, I think they'll do just fine long term. But
yes.
I think it could be a little bit of a rough start for them.
Right. I'm right there with you. And yeah, you're right. We're going to have to get creative to see how these games are performing. I think we can also look at NDP stats. That'll be a great way to see, because if PlayStation is moving more copies, we will know that, and therefore we will know that it's succeeding more because there's more out there. So in terms of which console will succeed most by the end of the generation, where do you think they stand?
By the end of the generation, it's really hard to say. I mean, you look at the PS3 and Xbox 360, and they almost, the 360 got off on such a stronger foot than PlayStation, but PlayStation caught up. Mm-hmm. And Xbox One has done they haven't nearly caught up to PlayStation this generation, but they've made up ground. So I think that, again, if I'm going really long term, my prediction is that if Xbox continues to do what they've been doing, hopefully they get a little better with their messaging. But if they continue to push Game Pass and they continue to invest in these studios and give them the creative freedom to make the games they want to make, I think by the end of the generation, I think that it could be neck and neck, but it's not going to be neck and neck in terms of, they've both sold the same number of consoles. It's going to be Xbox is healthy doing what they're doing, and PlayStation is healthy doing what they're doing. I think that that's where we hopefully are at the end of this generation, and I don't think that's far-fetched at all, even though I, again, think that it's going to be a rough start for Xbox.
Yes, I love the way that you said that. I think they will both be healthy. I think that's a great way of putting it. And I think that the one thing Xbox needs is to stay on message, like you said, but also they just need those games. They need those studios to perform. They need to be good. I mean, I don't want to call out any specific games, but exclusives on Xbox have been really disappointing to me in the past 4 years. So they need to turn that around. I mean, we need Fable to be amazing. We need Avowed to be amazing, and Halo Infinite needs to be the most amazing to me.
Yeah, and whatever the initiative is, that's their studio that they put together in California. Whatever they're coming up with also needs to be something that people really want. Like, whenever they reveal that, people have to, whether it's Perfect Dark or something entirely new, when people see it, I feel like a lot hinges on people saying yep, they get it.
Yeah, I'm excited to see that game.
So it'll be interesting to see. We get our hands on these systems in less than 2 months, which is hard to believe, but it's starting to feel a lot more real. You and I both got our pre-orders for PS5, very fortunately so, this last couple of days. So it's coming right up.
It is, yeah. Josh gave me the inside scoop on physical, in-person GameStop pre-orders. I rushed over there. I got so lucky. I felt, and it was just a really exciting time. So I can't wait to show up to that GameStop and grab it on November 12th.
Yeah. And the Xbox Series X, those pre-orders are, in fact, by the time we post this, I don't think we'll have pre-ordered.
Yeah.
And with that, we are going to take our second break. We'll be back in a minute. And we're back. So let's talk about what we've been playing. Jackson, what have you been spending your time with?
So I told you guys that I finished Black Flag recently. Love that game. But I also got to play Freedom Cry, which is the DLC. It's also standalone that follows Adewale, which is Edward Kenway's quartermaster turned assassin. I love the game. I think it's my favorite DLC in the entire series. It's something that every AC fan should play and experience. Very moving, very powerful story. It was excellent. I also finished Avengers, and man, I was just ultimately really disappointed with that experience. I just wanted something else. I don't know any other way to describe it. I'm certainly happy that people got a live servicey game for people that enjoy that. But for me, and I think a good chunk of others, I just wanted this to be like Spider-Man PS4, and that's not what we got. So that's really disappointing to me. And then I started Assassin's Creed Unity, and I don't want to rattle off too long, but my goodness, it is such a good AC game so far. It really paints a picture of what Assassin's Creed could have been like if it didn't launch in the way that it did. Revolutionary France is gorgeous. The mechanics are smooth. It was really one of the most ambitious titles in the series, and you can tell. So that's what I've been playing.
Man, you've been hitting the Assassin's Creed pretty hard.
I've got to finish a lot of games before Valhalla. That's my mission, so I got to get it done.
Nice. Well, unlike you, I put Avengers down. I know last week I said that I have a peeve of not, like, I hate not finishing games, but I like you, I kept playing it, and I was like, this isn't what I want, and life's too short for me to spend my time playing games I don't like. So I did drop Avengers, and I instead decided to pick up a game that is I was pretty sure is going to be in my Game of the Year discussion just because all the things I've heard about it, and that's Ori and the Will of the Wisps, which came out today on Switch as it happens. And man, this has got to be this might be the most beautiful 2D platformer, not that I've ever played, but just ever. It is such a gorgeous game. But what strikes me about it is how hard it is. I remember Ori and the Blind Forest. Yeah.
Yes.
The first game in the series being hard. But man, the amount of like pixel perfect jumps you have to make in this game, and also the lack of hand holding. The puzzles in this game are genuinely hard to figure out, and it doesn't tell you anything. So if you like 2D Metroidvanias and you like racking your brain and really kind of like almost Celeste level pixel perfect platforming, this is a fantastic game, but much more challenging than I had anticipated.
Yeah, this is a backlog game for me. I really want to play it. I've heard great things, and like you said, it looks gorgeous.
Yep, yeah. One of the most beautiful games I've ever played. Hands down. It's just stunning. So, and it's on Game Pass. So if you have Game Pass, you can just download it and start playing it.
There you go, proving our point.
Yep. So the last segment we are going to end on this week is we're going to dip into our mailbag once again. And I want to just reiterate, if you have any questions for Jackson or I, please write in. It's preloadedpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. Send us any questions you have, and we'll do our best to get to them on the next week's show. So this week, we got a question from Venom Snake. This actually came in a couple weeks back, and he asks a very interesting question. If gaming has only become more popular over time, then why hasn't any console surpassed the PlayStation 2 in sales? I feel like gaming in 2020 is much more popular than it was when the PS2 was out. I have my answer, but I'll kick it over to you, Jackson, to see what you have to say.
So Venom Snake, first off, thank you for sending in your question, and thanks for your patience if you're still listening from a few weeks back. I did some research, and I settled on the fact that the PS2 was in circulation for 14 years. So that gave it ample opportunity to sell really, really well. And I also came across the fact that I think a lot of the sales shifted between companies, between console manufacturers. If you look at sales since the Wii came out for Nintendo, they are selling way more home consoles now. Nintendo is killing it with the Wii. The Wii U was a bit of a bust there, but Switch is killing it. So I think a lot of those sales, I think it is going up incrementally, but it's just being shifted. There's a lot of mobile platforms like Nintendo 3DS, DS, all of those have sold insanely well. You also have a lot of mobile gamers. So I think when you say gaming is more popular, I think, yeah, core gaming has evolved and grown, but casual gaming is really where we've seen this industry boost a ton. It's not something that we really talk about a ton because it doesn't interest us personally. But I think gaming as a whole is much more popular now. You're correct. But in different spaces, and the hardware shift is where that comes from.
Yeah, and as someone who was, I was well into my gaming career when when the PlayStation 2 came out, and one thing that a lot of people, younger people nowadays, might not know if they didn't read about it is that the PlayStation 2 had a DVD player, a high quality DVD player built into it. And when the PlayStation 2 came out, it was cheaper than most high quality DVD players on the market. So a lot of people who didn't have any interest in a PlayStation 2 went out and bought one just for that reason, just so they could play DVDs at home.
Wow.
You got to keep in mind, this console launched, I think it was either 2000 or 2001.
I want to say it's 2000 from what I looked at.
So, and that was a big deal. And that, for that reason, it sold a lot of units that it wouldn't have sold had it not had a DVD player. And it was to people who didn't really have an interest in gaming. So that's another reason that the PlayStation 2 got a huge boost at its launch. You want to talk about the PlayStation 5 being hard to find, I think it was about 3 or 4 months after launch that I was able to finally get a PlayStation 2. It was really hard to find. And
that's fascinating. I had no idea.
Yeah. So that's just another reason that it got the boost that it did. And yeah, Sony didn't stop making, like, there were PlayStation 2 games coming out like halfway or even longer through the PlayStation 3's life cycle.
Yes, lots of sports games, because they knew that a lot of people out there weren't habitual video game players like a lot of the hardcore audience. But if they saw the new NCAA football and they only had a PS2, they would buy it, and it made sense.
Yep. Yeah. I won't pick it up, but I've got mine sitting right behind me. I still play my PlayStation 2 every now and then.
It's a great console. I loved mine.
Yep. So anyways, that is, I think this is going to be by far our longest episode of Preloaded. Hopefully everyone enjoyed it and stuck with it. If you did, thank you very much for listening. Again, you can write into Preloaded at the email address preloadedpodcast@gmail.com. And if you are listening on any of the audio platforms, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Stitcher, we'd love for you to subscribe there and rate the podcast if you have time. That will help us out a great deal. And if you're on YouTube, thanks for watching. Drop a comment, and Jackson and I will get in there and have a conversation with you guys there. We'll look forward to hearing from you. So with that, I will thank you for listening and watching, and we will see you next week.
Bye, guys.